Is going on, guys? This is Michael Williams from Cartoon Universe, and man, Star is on fire right now. Star is like the most fire cartoon out right now. It's even probably topping the hype of Steven Universe, but we'll see what Rose's Room has to offer. But this show has just been on absolute fire lately. These last few episodes have just given us a ton of lore and development for the actual story, and it's super duper exciting. And I can't wait to see what happens. But last episode was The Hard Way, and we got some very interesting development for Ludo. And of course, by the end, we see that Toffee is returning, not quite in the form that we expected, but we did mention that yesterday in yesterday's video about Eclipsa, that Toffee's voice actor was listed in the credits, so it turns out that that is true. Toffee is back. He was at the end of the episode, like I said. I figured there would be some type of big reveal, and there's a lot of crazy stuff to cover. So there's going to be a part secrets analysis review / also a theory on what it means for Toffee to be returning to Star versus the Forces of Evil, and what I think his overall plan is. Somewhat of a follow-up to yesterday's video, and just kind of bringing back the points I made in that video and seeing how this actually kind of backs that up more. But we see Ludo. We finally get some development for Ludo. He looks like he has like a new base. It's like a new castle type of place, which the wand told him about. And I think it's safe to say that Toffee already knew about this place. Toffee probably knew this place from the war or something like that, given that there is a holding room for Glossaryck and it's a castle. And I figure this would be some type of monster-based base, if you will. And the minions are super obedient, like as they have been recently, much more obedient than Ludo's monster people. He's got the mice on lock. He's got it down to a T. He's a much more of a threat, much more competent antagonist. But he has Glossaryck locked up because he assumes that Glossaryck is not going to be willing to help. And an interesting point is he actually talks to the wand. The wand kind of tells him to do something, and Ludo says that they'll do that as a last resort, which is very interesting. I'm not sure if that will come into play later. I'm not sure if this is some type of crazy spell or anything like that, if the wand told him like to start torturing him or something like that. But this might just be something that was said to kind of relay the point that Ludo is here to pretty much interrogate Glossaryck and get as much information out of him as possible, not knowing that Glossaryck actually is going to be willing to help. So it may have been nothing, it may be something. I guess we'll see. I don't know. We'll figure it out, because I feel like the wand's not telling Ludo everything right away, so I don't think Ludo necessarily knows about any type of spell or something that he could do that would cause torture or death or something like that. I don't know if Ludo is that well educated at this point. But Glossaryck is pretty much willing to help. He kind of has to help, which is pretty interesting. I'm going to talk about Glossaryck's motives later, because now I'm kind of on the fence as of right now as to what Glossaryck's plan is, or if he even has one. But we know Glossaryck is more or less bound by the book, so he says we'll see what happens with Glossaryck. Like I said, we'll talk about that later. But Ludo wants to train. Glossaryck basically said he could bring out all of his potential, all of Ludo's potential that he possibly can, and Ludo is super ready. He's super hype, and he wants the training to be hard and grueling. And they go out and start doing meaningless physical activities that's very hard and grueling, and Ludo's like, this sucks, I haven't even learned any spells, this is stupid. And Glossaryck's like, oh, you just have to ask to learn some spells. So he asks to learn some spells, but he says he doesn't know what he wants, and he starts going in this spiel about his father. And this is very, very interesting, because we get some super important character development and backstory for Ludo, and it's pretty quick, but it's actually very relevant to Ludo and what I think his character arc is going to be, because as I mentioned yesterday, I think Ludo is actually going to be redeemed at some point, but I think my stance has kind of changed slightly on that. Yesterday I said that I felt Ludo was actually going to get tossed aside again by Toffee once Toffee has everything he wants, but I'm not so sure that's going to be the case, considering Ludo seems to be very competent with the wand, A, and B, I don't know, he just seems like more of a threat. He seems like someone that might be actually worth keeping around, especially since he has all of his mice minions. He has the eagle, spider, so I feel like he's actually more worthy of sticking around, at least even from Toffee's perspective. But he goes on the spiel about his father and how he was one egg of 50, and he basically had to fend for himself and figure out life and deal with life the dirty way and the mean way. And that's basically how we have Ludo as he is today. And I wonder if we're ever going to see any of his siblings. That would be very interesting. I feel like his father might be like dead. I don't know why. I just get that vibe. But it'd be interesting to see if we meet any of the other 50 eggs that there were, that his brothers and sisters and stuff, that might actually come true. Who knows? We didn't get any information on what happened to them, but we now know why Ludo is the way he is, why he acts the way he acts, and why he's also kind of goofy and incompetent, because he's not evil to his core, right? He's not like a terrible person. He just does bad things because he feels like that's how he has to do it, and he was raised basically by himself, essentially, because he was just one egg of 50. So I'm sure the father had some favorites and whatnot. So he has daddy issues, is long story short. So that kind of backs up my point of why I think Ludo is going to be redeemed. And I think that might happen relatively soon, possibly next season. Yeah, so he basically he learned some spells, and Glossaryck is teaching him to do Levitato, which is this basic, very simple levitating spell, and he pretty much mastered it almost right away. He in one day he masters the entire spell, and he's very much more obedient, much more willing to listen and concentrate on the book than Star. That doesn't mean he's more powerful than Star. Star is probably more powerful, considering Baby said she hasn't seen power like this since Queen Eclipsa. So Star's more powerful, Star has more potential, but Ludo is following directions better, so he's probably going to be pretty well equipped, and might be even more well equipped than Star, even though he's technically weaker than Star. But what was really interesting is Glossaryck was doing the same test that Baby did on Star, which was bring the apple to me. So all Star had to do was this super basic Levitato spell, but she was just doing all this craziness that she made up in her imagination, in her head. So that was pretty interesting to see. But basically they go to bed, and Glossaryck's tucking Ludo in. Really funny moment. Calls him my darling. It's uncomfortable and hilarious at the same time. And basically the wand tells Ludo that Glossaryck is holding out a secret chapter that he wants to see. So Ludo's like, what's really interesting is, going back to the father is Glossaryck, it seems sort of like a father figure in Ludo's eyes. He's like the guardian, that's someone who's actually giving him guidance. So that's actually very interesting. So it seems like Ludo really trusts and almost cares about Glossaryck, which is it's an interesting development that I didn't expect was going to happen. But he's tucked into bed, and he's like, gets out of bed, he runs to the book, he's like, Glossaryck, wake up, I heard there's a secret chapter that you're not letting us in on, blah 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 blah. And Glossaryck's like, yeah, pretty much, that happened, you're not ready for it, blah blah blah. And he was like, did Star see it? He's like, well, she saw it, but I didn't show her. And he's like, I want to see it. And this chapter is, of course, Eclipse's chapter, and this is when things get super duper real. This is when things get super duper hype. So he opens Eclipse's chapter, and we see the parallel of when Marco saw the chapter, of when they're floating up into the air, and there's a big purplish pink vortex around them, and their eyes are all messed up. What was very interesting is Ludo's eyes were glowing green, and there was like a vortex within them, and it looked like the green vortex from yesterday's episode, the Crystal Clear, when Romulus said that there was a Fritz, and there was a big dimensional rift up in the sky, and it was green, and it was swirling much like his eyes. So that leads me to believe that this was also correct about TOFFEE, about TOFFEE basically causing the rift, the magical Fritz, on purpose, and TOFFEE / Star's wand being pretty much the source of that. And I feel like Ludo was kind of tapping into whatever that rift was at that moment. So that's super duper interesting. But what's interesting is now TOFFEE is talking. Now we finally hear TOFFEE's voice after all this time. It's been so long. TOFFEE is pretty much back, not in his full form, obviously, but he's back. He talks through Ludo. He sounds so menacing. And TOFFEE knows Glossaryck. Glossaryck and TOFFEE know each other. This is the first on-screen interaction we've gotten with them, and yet they are very aware of each other's presence. They seem to have had rapport of some sort, which, again, goes back to yesterday's video of me stating that I think TOFFEE has a connection with Eclipsa, which is also backed up by the fact that TOFFEE was aware of Eclipsa's chapter and was aware of what it could do. Now, and somehow he was aware that he would be able to basically possess Ludo via that chapter. I'm not sure how that works. Maybe it's because it's a dark wand and that chapter is full of dark magic, so he was able to tap into the wand holder since TOFFEE was within the wand and basically possessed them. I know that's probably what's going on, or maybe there's some type of specific spell that Eclipsa had that allows someone from within the wand to connect with the person who's holding the wand. That's very specific, but who knows? But the bottom line is Toffee was aware of Eclipse's chapter. I don't know how he would be aware of Eclipse's chapter if he didn't have some sort of connection with the butterfly family, specifically Eclipse. So that's why I believe him and Eclipse have had some type of history. And yeah, we basically see that Glossaryck doesn't have a side. Glossaryck explains he doesn't have a side. Toffee says, you'll never get Ludo to your side. So I'm assuming the good side, Star's side, the side of light, if you will. But Glossaryck's like, I don't have a side. And Toffee's like, I guess you don't, do you? Excellent, I'm a villain. That's super interesting. Now, this could mean one of two things. So yesterday I said that I felt Glossaryck had some kind of greater plan for the greater good, that he was pretty much aware of everything that was going on, especially since he's like all-knowing, so he probably understands the future anyway, maybe, which could also be why he's so nonchalant about everything. However, I feel like there is a possibility, and this would be very interesting, that Glossaryck is a true neutral character, and I think it could go either way. I'm still lean more on the side of Glossaryck is pretty much a good guy and has a conscience and wants to do what's right, but he might also be neutral. Now, he could technically be neutral not by choice, because we know he's kind of bound by the book, sort of like a genie, so he kind of has to do what the person that has the book says, essentially, for the most part. So I feel like that it's possible that he doesn't have a side just by happenstance. He doesn't have a side because he doesn't have a choice to not have a side. He can't pick a side. He has to do whatever the holder of the book says. There's nothing he can really do to change their mind for the most part. He's bound by that. He's essentially a slave. So that's a possibility, and it's also a possibility that deep down inside, as a person, as a conscience, he doesn't really care what happens because he's so super powerful and so all-knowing that yes, he's bound by the book, but at the same time, he could potentially feel very neutral. He could potentially not have any super stakes within the greater good or greater evil or whatever, because he never really seemed like he cared for Star that much. Like, I don't recall any super emotional moments between them. He's always seemed very chill and nonchalant about everything for the most part. Again, that could just be a game he plays, and also could be chalked up to him being all-knowing, so he already knows what's going to happen, and he already knows everything's going to be okay. So I'm not sure. It's almost 50-50. Like I said, I still lean more on the side that Glossaryck is good. He has a greater plan, and he knows how things are going to work out, and he knows what he has to do to make those things work out the way that he wants them to. But there is a possibility that Glossaryck is a true neutral character, which would be very interesting and be a cool dynamic to see. But I feel like by the end of the series, I don't know if they're going to do that with Glossaryck, because eventually Star's going to have to get the book back, and that'd be just kind of weird for Glossaryck to not be a good guy. So I guess we'll see. Or maybe Glossaryck just is a true neutral, and that's why Star started her own book, and Star's going to basically make her own spells and do things her own way, because Glossaryck is kind of a jerk. It's kind of a tool who doesn't really care about anything. So who knows? But that was a very interesting point, and they have history, which again leads me to believe that Toffee did have history with Eclipse because he was aware of the chapter and he knew Glossaryck. And something else that was pointed out to me by Vox in the Discord, shout out to Alshar Vox from the Roundtable. If you're not subscribed, what are you doing? You're super late. Go subscribe to him. I'll leave a link to his channel down below. But he pointed out to me that in Eclipse's crystallized crystal, basically she's missing an arm. Like, her arm is there, but it's detached from her body. And this is something that we've seen multiple times throughout the series. Like, we've seen Toffee's finger, we've seen Rastakor, we've seen Marco's arm, of course, and it's always the same arm, and Tom as well in Blood Moon Ball. And it's always the same arm. It's always the right arm. So this leads me to believe that after seeing this parallel with Ludo and Marco, that Marco almost definitely is going to be fighting for the side of the monsters, and there's almost definitely a connection between all of these characters in some way, shape, or form, especially Toffee and Eclipse, and I think this is going to get super huge, super fast. And Slice of Otaku also, shout out to Slice of Otaku. If you're not subscribed, what are you doing? Go subscribe to Slice of Otaku. He mentioned in his review that he believes that this actually takes place before Raid the Cave, because in Raid the Cave we see Glossaryck eating pudding and chilling. So this leads us to believe that Glossaryck has basically won this favor of Ludo, essentially, that he's not like being held captive anymore, because in the beginning of this episode he's being held captive. Ludo doesn't offer him any pudding until after but Glossaryck basically agrees to help him out. So I think there's a possibility that I pretty much agree. I think this probably takes place before Raid the Cave, which is interesting because Ludo is pretty much gone when Star talks to Glossaryck. So I wonder what Ludo's doing exactly, what type of training he's getting into. I think TOFFEE is slowly reeling him in to bringing himself to be reborn through Eclipse's chapter. And I think the key there, the main key of all of this, is Eclipsa and her chapter. And I think TOFFEE knows this, and TOFFEE knows a way to become beat by Eclipse's chapter. So I think that's what we're going to end up seeing probably by the end of the season. The season finale is pretty soon, guys, by the end of the month. So like we're on our way. It's gonna get super duper crazy. But what did you guys think of this episode? What do you guys think of TOFFEE returning? It's hype. The best villain. Yeah, it's super exciting. Star is really on a super high point right now, and I'm super excited to see what happens with TOFFEE and Eclipsa. Eclipsa's coming back. It's gonna be so good. I can't wait. But what do you guys think of this episode? What do you guys think of TOFFEE? Let us know in the comments down below. As always, thanks for tuning in. I've been Michael Williams. You've been watching Cartoon Universe, and we'll see you in the next video. Peace.